The world has rules and you must obey them. We are, as human beings, we have limits. There are limits placed upon us, and much of living and becoming adults and becoming wise people is coming to terms with these limits. I know this is frustrating. It's endlessly frustrating. It's always been frustrating that there are limits, that there are rules. The fact that it is frustrating is part of what it means to be human. Hi, this is not how this YouTube video was supposed to begin. Here's something I struggle with as a YouTuber. Here's my process. I think of a problem, I start to make notes, I write some things down, and then I sit down and I record a video where I make a kind of preliminary argument, a series of observations. And then when I go to edit that video, I realize that everything I said was wrong. Well, not wrong exactly, but flawed, incomplete, lacking clarity. So then future me has to come in and make all kinds of revisions and corrections. When I was making this video about the rules that govern human life, I was thinking a lot of thoughts. It's like as we're trying to satisfy the issues, I've been thinking a lot that maybe that you know, to what extent, just really going through it. But I think I need to get some clarity on these things, these rules that govern our lives, because both for me and for you, because I think understanding these things well is the difference between contentment and just being pummeled by the universe. So let me provide a kind of map, an outline to the argument of this video, because this guy is not entirely coherent all of the time. Here are the various threads I'm following in this video. First, we need to talk a bit about self-knowledge, because understanding ourselves, understanding what we are, will help us understand more about the rules that constrain us. And then I'll be back, future me. I'll return to answer a very important question about these rules. Specifically, where do they come from? Who imposes whose rules are these? Who says we need to obey them? I don't like anybody telling me what to do. And then we'll talk about what the rules are specifically. There are actually 4 of them, I think, that I feel pretty good about. Like, I could say that these are real things. So we'll discuss those at the end, and we'll figure this out together so that we can avoid being pummeled by the universe. So first, let's go back to my past self and watch me think through my unhealthy obsession with self-knowledge. So here's the thing. I think a lot about myself. I'm very interested in self-knowledge, this our capacity to know ourselves. Who are you? What are you? What's your purpose? Your identity. But here's the thing. To know yourself, in one sense, this is it's a very particular thing, right? There are things about you that are unique. Your experience is different from everyone else's experience. So knowing yourself is understanding these unique and intimate parts of yourself. But on the other hand, to understand yourself is to recognize that you're just one person. You're a type of thing. You belong to the genre of humanity. Like you're just some person. And as a person, you're just like everybody else. Let me just say this. I'm not working from a very detailed script here. I'm just working off loose notes. So I know when I do the video editing, I'm going to have to come back in, and you're going to see future me explaining the stuff that current me was too dumb to figure out. Indeed, that's what's happening. It's happening right now. The point past me is trying to make, and the reason this matters, is that in many areas of society, and I have participated in this, I am part of this, we place a lot of emphasis on self-discovery. We emphasize the idea that growing up, that education is really about self-discovery, discovering your own particular skills, your interests, your weaknesses. And in a way, this is true. That is an integral part of education, of growing up. But this is the thing I'm thinking about, that I'm struggling with as an educator myself. If education is only about self-discovery, is about kind of uncovering individuality, then I think we miss something really important. Because it's true that you and me, all of us, we are unique beings, we are individuals, but we're also all kind of the same. We're also just like everybody else. And in that way, there are certain general rules that apply to all of us. Like we're all constrained or limited in the same ways. And in fact, this brings us to the second destination on our map or point on our outline: rules and where they come from. Here's the thing. If I say to you that there are rules that you need to obey, you'll probably get frustrated and kind of mad at me.
Eat my shorts.
Who makes the rules? You will want to ask. Who says we need to obey them? These are excellent questions. These are exactly the questions you want to ask, and I don't really know the answers to them. Maybe a future version of myself will now show up in the video to explain the thing I don't totally understand. Now would be a great time. Is anybody coming? Okay, future me is obviously of no help. Hey, sorry I'm late. I don't really have a lot to add to what past future me is about to say. He's about to say really smart things. But I wanted to drop in because I forgot to introduce myself. I always do this. I'm Professor Andrew Moore. I teach great books at St. Thomas University. And hey, if you're enjoying this video, I want to encourage you to subscribe. I make videos about ideas and books and philosophy and literature. And we're approaching 2 million subscribers. We are currently very far away from that goal. We're at a little under, just under 25,000. So slightly more than 1% of the way there. Real opportunity to get in on the ground floor here. In fact, let me just do some quick math. We take 2 million, times 24,000, say like 1,100 of you watching the video. If each of you could just tell like 1,800 people, tell a friend. Tell a friend. In the meantime, we'll get back to my friend from the recent past who's about to answer all your questions, I'm sure. Where do the rules come from? I don't know the answer. Here are some possible answers. One, maybe the rules come from God. That is something that many people have thought and continue to think. That the rules are divine in origin. But which God are we talking about? And if you're someone who doesn't believe in God, do the rules still apply to you? If you're the sort of person who believes that God doesn't exist, well, okay, do you think that there are no rules that govern human conduct then? If there's no God, are there no rules? Probably you don't think that. Maybe you think, or maybe we could all think that nature is the source of these rules. Maybe something like the laws of nature. Maybe those are a thing. That's a productive line of inquiry, and maybe a little more reliable than a God that we can't see. But take it from me, someone who's thought a lot about the laws of nature, the whole concept of nature is murkier and less solid than we would like it to be. Like when we talk about the laws of nature governing human conduct, do we mean that, are they the same as like the laws of physics, like laws of force and mass? Are we compelled to follow them? It doesn't seem like it. We can break the laws of nature. In fact, we can do unnatural things. That's kind of weird, right? Have you ever thought about the word unnatural? How is it possible for us, a natural being, to do an unnatural thing, to act against our nature? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Couple that with the fact that we have wildly different ideas about what is and is not natural. People say all kinds of things are natural. They might say, for example, that it's natural for you to want children, want to have children. And it kind of is, except it also kind of isn't. Like lots of people do have a sort of instinct or deep-seated desire to procreate, but other people don't. That seems very normal and therefore isn't that natural too? So then we must ask ourselves, are these the rules that seem to operate in the world? Are they just made up? Are they made up by people? Did we just made them up? Is that where the rules come from? Maybe we make up the rules, but then the problem we run into is, are the rules just based on majority opinion? Like, is it just that there's like a consensus among lots of people or powerful people that these are what the rules will be, and everybody else will just have to follow them, or everybody in perpetuity will just follow these rules? Because if that's the deal, like if it's just majority rule, well, that's a problem, because majorities tend to make lots of bad decisions. Like majorities aren't always reliable. Historically speaking, in particular, majorities tyrannize minorities. So Are the rules that govern human life, are they just an instance of tyranny of the majority? And if you think that, then I hate to break it to you, but then there's no such thing as justice or a principle. And if you want to argue about some political thing or protest something or stand up for some cause, there's no sort of principle or objective good to which you are appealing. You're just engaged in a kind of power politics where you want not to be dominated and want instead for your preference to dominate over other people. Things get pretty bleak pretty fast. I do think that there are some rules that operate in the world irrespective of our preferences. They aren't made up by us. We did not choose or invent them. And it may be easier to think about these if we stop calling them rules. It's easier to make sense of them, I find, if we think of them as limits. Because you might hate rules and the idea that anyone's telling you what to do, but you probably recognize that you and everybody else you've ever met does have limits. And I do think understanding these limits helps us understand what we are and what we have in common. As a teacher, one of the topics that I'm always talking about in class and on YouTube, and sometimes just in conversation, is mortality. And I think the reason I'm drawn to this, especially in the classroom, why I'm drawn to the subject of mortality is because this is going to sound crazy, but it's something we all have in common. And this is super important, actually, to bring up. Here's this thing that we all have in common. Very dark, very bleak, but it's something we all share. But it's critical, I think, because mortality is this undeniable standard that we can all agree exists. Doesn't matter where you come from, how old you are, whether you're religious, whether you're not religious, we can all agree that mortality is a thing, and we just have to accept it. And I find as a teacher and maybe as a YouTuber, we can build on that. Like that's a sturdy foundation, something we all agree on. We've all got that in common. All right, now we can start thinking maybe about other things that we have in common. How does the limit of mortality shape us as beings? How does it determine the course of our lives, what we do with our time? Now, interestingly, there's another limit that applies to all of us, and that is natality, which is kind of mortality's opposite. This is the fact that we are born. So not only are we mortal, we're all going to die, we were all born. And despite the fact that our births are unique, right? We were all born in a different place, to different parents at a different time. We all share this experience of being born. And that may be a weird thing to think about, but here's what it means. It means none of us chose this ride. We were all just brought here. In a certain sense, we're all here against our will. We came from nowhere to exist right now. Hey, do you want to hear something beautiful? The thinker who really expertly explains this idea of natality is named Hannah Arendt. So let me read you a passage from her work, The Human Condition. It's about Christmas, so it's seasonal. The miracle that saves the world, the realm of human affairs, from its normal, natural ruin, is ultimately the fact of natality, in which the faculty of action is ontologically rooted. It is, in other words, the birth of new men and the new beginning, the action they are capable of by virtue of being born. Only the full experience of this capacity can bestow upon human affairs faith and hope. It is this faith in and hope for the world that found perhaps its most glorious and most succinct expression in the few words with which the Gospels announced their glad tidings. A child has been born unto us. Now, Hannah Arendt is not a Christian. She's Jewish. She was born in Germany, immigrated to America. But her point is really about like the mythological meaning of the Christmas story, the birth of a savior. What she finds in this story is that our human capacity to bring new and unexpected things into the world is rooted in the fact of our natality, the fact that we're born. The idea of natality actually links together our sameness and our uniqueness, because part of Arendt's point here is that every new person, every new life, every person who's born into the world changes the equation. By virtue of being born, every person literally changes the world. And any human life could change the world, even the course of world history in ways that we might not be able to predict. And so for Arant, that's something that's special about each of us, but also true of all of us. It's beautiful, right? I told you it was beautiful. Okay, two more limits, two more rules that we need to talk about. And the first one is about restlessness. Here's the thing. You will always be restless. Another thing we all seem to have in common, something I've been thinking a bit about this semester, is restlessness. We are all restless just by nature of our being. One way to think about this is just that, like, we're constantly in motion. We're constantly changing, right? Like, we're getting older. You gotta eat, you gotta drink, you gotta sleep, you gotta move. We are not still perfect fixed beings, fixed in time or space or anything. Like, we're in constant motion. And this also means in some way that we are like perpetually unsatisfied. Like, on some fundamental level, we're just unsatisfied. We just always need more, and we want more, right? Like, I just had lunch. I want more lunch. And and even if I could control my appetite for lunch, in a few hours, I'm whether I like it or not, I'm going to have to eat again. There's a kind of fundamental restlessness we have, which I think is also, is a kind of existential restlessness. Like, it's not just that you're hungry, it's that you're hungry for meaning. I always think of it, this is a dated example right now, but you guys remember Charlie Sheen, Hollywood actor, and he was on 2.5 Men, that sitcom, and it was like the most popular sitcom in the world, and he was getting paid like $2 million an episode. And then there was that one summer, I think, where Charlie Sheen just went off the rails, and he was talking about tiger blood.
I got tiger blood, man.
I remember thinking at the time that here is a great example of a person who's famous, who's successful. He dates movie stars, things that people would envy, markers of success and achievement and happiness. And yet he was clearly very unwell.
Dying's for fools.
Charlie Sheen was like the poster boy of this existential restlessness, this desire, insatiable desire for something else, something more. I'm really just paraphrasing Augustine here, Augustine of Hippo. He was a very famous ancient philosopher and theologian. Augustine was born in North Africa in what is now Algeria. He lived in the 4th and 5th century. And his work, The Confessions, is maybe the most famous autobiography of all time. And in this work, Augustine represents himself as someone who is restless. He is constantly seeking satisfaction and fulfillment throughout his whole life. And for a long period of time, when Augustine is younger, in his own account, he mostly pursues sex and bodily pleasure. That's how he seeks fulfillment and satisfaction. He tries over and over again to satisfy his desires, but he ultimately finds that this does not really fulfill him. So I arrived at Carthage, where the din of scandalous love affairs raged cauldron-like around me. I was not yet in love, but I was enamored with the idea of love, and so deep within me was my need that I hated myself for the sluggishness of my desires. In love with loving, I was casting about for something to love. The security of a way of life free from pitfalls seemed abhorrent to me, because I was inwardly starved of that food which is yourself, oh my God. Augustine ultimately determines that it's only through God, it's through faith that he's going to satisfy his desires, that he's going to finally find rest in God. And Augustine's argument is really compelling whether or not you believe in God, because really the reason Augustine settles on God as the thing that's going to fulfill him is because he's trying to find something. He is looking for something that is durable and permanent and not fleeting and disposable. And so even if you don't think of yourself as like a created being, like God created the universe, you do probably recognize that there are some goods that are more substantive, more permanent, more fulfilling than others. Like, you recognize there are certain goods that are worthy of your time and your energy and your effort, and then there are other goods, other things that aren't worth spending your time and your money and your energy on. Like online gambling might be fun. It might give you a thrill or a rush, but it's not the same kind of good, the same kind of satisfaction that comes from financial stability, from, putting a down payment on a house or saving for your kids' education. Like, those are higher, more durable goods. There are lots of other kinds of goods that are much more fleeting, right? Much more ephemeral. But before I get back to my past self, I want to warn you, there's something that happens here. I'll just prepare you for it. in the midst of talking, I actually come to a revelation about the relationship between restlessness and self-knowledge. And you could kind of see like me figuring this out in real time. This is such a messy video, but I do sort of figure something out here in real time, which is kind of cool. Watch it happen. But this is where the trouble is. This is it. This is the source of the problem. Is it? Is it? As humans, we're just by definition restless, changeable emotion. We always want things. And one thing we have to learn about the world and its rules is that you can choose certain things to satisfy that need to like fill that aching, yawning chasm inside yourself, but not everything will satisfy in the way you want it to. And it may be that the danger of pursuing self-knowledge is that the self trying to understand itself is kind of an endlessly irresolvable puzzle. Like it just kind of goes round and round. And because the self is changing, because you are different at every single moment, the thing you're trying to understand is also different at every single moment. And so it's in constant motion and you can never quite like get it fixed in place and never quite answer the question perfectly. So there's always more to answer. There's always more to consider. So the self itself becomes a sort of thing that you might pursue, like knowledge of the self in order to fulfill that need, like that existential desire for meaning and purpose. You could resolve it if you could figure out what you are, and you're so close, but you keep changing. But if you keep trying, you can almost get there, but it's always changing. So you're never going to get there. That's sort of part of the problem. That's part of the problem. Yep, that's part of the problem. Here's the other problem. The last rule I want to talk to you about. We sometimes respond to the problem of our insufficiency by pursuing the illusion of self-sufficiency. And the other problem is that we sometimes try to resolve our neediness, our restlessness, by finding that filling it with stuff, right? Like power, consumer goods, finding these things that we think will satisfy us. And we have the sense if we're rich enough and powerful enough that we will be self-sufficient. We won't need anything anymore. And I don't know, when you look at some of the most powerful people in the world at the moment and think about how much they need attention, it's clear that money and power, in fact, you could have the most money in the world or be the most powerful person in the world, and you might still be filled with need and restlessness and a desire for more, an endless desire for more. So this pursuit of self-sufficiency is an illusion. Like that's a trap. That you're never going to have that. You want it, but you're never going to have it. This is what Shakespearean tragedy is all about, right? Shakespearean tragedies are all about this. It's Julius Caesar saying, I am constant as the northern star. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's just some guy. And at the moment he says he's constant as a northern star, it's demonstrated to him that he's not. I said at the outset that this was frustrating. This is just your condition. Maybe your nature. You are just a needy being and you cannot stop needing things. And if you ignore that aspect of yourself, if you forget that you are mortal, if you forget that you were born like every other person, if you delude yourself into thinking you can satisfy your deep human needs with disposable and ephemeral things, if you persuade yourself that you somehow do not need anything or anyone, that you are somehow above all the petty concerns of ordinary humans, if you persuade yourself of these things, you will be pummeled by the universe. Sorry, I don't make the rules. We are limited beings. We are limited by forces outside of ourselves. And I think we ought to spend more time as people thinking about the forces outside of ourselves that define us and shape our lives. And here's the thing, fate might be one of those things. Fate might be a real thing. I have a video about that very subject, so why don't you click on the link? I will see you over there, and I will talk to you soon.